I read these stories that are coming out of Los Angeles, and I can't believe it. The Lakers might let Luke Walton outmaneuver them. Like, Luke Walton be a hot candidate for that opening Kings job. Like, if other people want him, then what is happening? Like, what? First of all, a little vindication for Magic here, because these leaks still coming. Magic's not there anymore. So everyone's like, we get tight ship here in Los Angeles. Magic was just talking to everybody. Okay, well, the leaks are still coming. Mm-hmm. Why would you put any message out other than this? Our entire focus is in filling our vacant president of basketball operations job. We think it is the best job in all of sports. You get to run the Los Angeles Lakers, and you inherit a team with the best player in the world, and we are going to hire the best person possible, and anyone else in the organization, their future will be determined by that person. Why are you adding in prerequisites that might make the best person available say, well, so if I come there, I don't have the flexibility with my own coach. And I'm not saying Rob Pelinka needs to be fired. I'm saying that needs to be a decision for the person they hire. I am saying Luke Walton needs to be fired, but I also think whomever they hire would come to that conclusion. I don't understand how the Lakers could possibly be taking what was, even though it was awkward, a gift given to them by Magic Johnson, which is an opportunity to reset how this franchise is being run, and have the response be, no, you know what? We think this year went pretty well, and we just want to run it back. I don't understand it.
Well, and my hope is that the reason why, and I differ in my opinion of Luke Walton with you. I think that he has been under very challenging circumstances in these first few seasons, so we haven't got a true chance to see what type of coach he is. I believe that he could be a very good coach in the NBA, but that aside, I am hoping that Jeannie Buss and the decision to keep Pelinka and Walton where they're at right now is just to keep the organization running during the time being. They've got draft workouts coming up. There's things organizationally you need to do during this time period, so you have people in place that can get those things done. To your point, Nick, I 100% agree that this job, this is going to be we talk so much about free agency. Who's going to come to Lakers in free agency? To me, it's not about that. Who are you going to hire to entirely put this organization back in line? And they should have free reign to hire whoever they want, to have their people in. Think about how much we talked about throughout the course of the season. Well, it's not their people. And I think one of the underrated things, and I'll include myself in this boat, we talk so much about Walton not being Rob Pelinka and Magic's guy. Well, Pelinka, clearly, as Magic had stated, was not his guy. And so it is about hiring the best candidate out there. And I do think that you could look at those that are currently in positions now. Don't hold yourself to just people who are available.
Of course.
They can entice others that are in positions.
Well, you got to bring in competent people to work in the front office. I mean, Rob Pelinka didn't have much experience working in the front office. He worked with front offices and getting player contracts done. He was Kobe agent, and so that's why Jeannie Buss has that long-standing relationship with him. But you talked about the offseason starting for the Lakers and how much work that needs to be done. I'm right there with Nick. I think the priority for the Lakers absolutely has to be finding who the next team president is going to be and then empowering them and giving them the autonomy to hire the people that they want in the building, working with them, and they can build this team according to their vision. I don't think it's a situation where you can let Rob Pelinka and Luke Walton stay around and go through player evaluations and go through the offseason and then at some point, whether it's after the draft or after free agency, decide you're going to move on from them. I think that's too late at that point. I think this organization needs a drastic change. They have to pivot. This was a failed season no matter how you look at it, and I think they've got to go out there and find somebody that they can trust, empower that individual to make the decisions to move them into the future.
And here's the thing. I want to be fair to Rob Pelinka. I don't know if Rob Pelinka is good or bad at his job because I don't know what the separation of powers was between Magic and Pelinka. Like, was Rob Pelinka just quietly behind the scenes saying, Magic, we need shooters? And Magic says, no, we're doing it the right way. Or was Rob fully on board? Because the way Magic and Rob presented their relationship is we both get up at 5 a.m., we call each other, we're best buds. That clearly was a lie. That clearly they were not hand in glove relationship-wise. But you can make a case, Rob Pelinka. Somebody drafted Kyle Kuzma 27th. Somebody drafted Josh Hart 30th. Those were good draft picks.
Yes.
And so somebody does need to get credit for that. On the Luke Walton front, I am not saying Luke Walton won't one day be a good head coach. What I am saying is this. if they run it back with Luke and just elevate Pelinka, are they doing anything differently that, as an organization, that they would be doing if LeBron didn't sign there? If LeBron didn't sign there and they just had this young core and Magic resigned, then I think you could make the argument, hey, this year was hurt by injuries. We're going to keep it going. You cannot treat this situation as if there isn't the elephant in the room, which is you have the LeBron James with a couple years left of MVP caliber play. And what do we do to maximize it? To your point about going after guys that are in current positions, Mark Stein reported they'd go after Bob Myers. There could be a bonus in that. I don't think Klay Thompson's realistic, but maybe he is as a free agent if Bob Myers comes. You brought up Jerry West. I think that's a tough sell, but if you get him, maybe that weakens Kawhi Leonard's want to go to the Clippers. I brought up Masai Ujiri. I know that would weaken Kawhi Leonard's want to stay with the Raptors. There are people in positions that we know can do the job. There's David Griffin sitting out there who we know can do the job.
So there are guys who can help begin the domino effect of all the needs that the Lakers have, but status quo is not the right answer. Status quo doesn't get you any of the things, the shooters, the free agent, the coach, any of those things.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you brought up the word trust. More than when you look at organizations in the infrastructure of front offices that are successful, it is about trust, and that's not just about two guys getting along. We always hear this when you hear about R.C. Buford and Greg Popovich, about how the beauty of their relationship is their synergy, but also that they will disagree with one another. And they will have different perspectives, different opinions. It's a collaborative effort amongst the entire group and entire front office. And that, I think, is what you need when it comes to, that's when people say having their own people. It's not just, oh, this is my buddy, and I like him, and I like to be at work with him every day.
You have an established working relationship, and you know you can believe in and rely on the other person.
The only good thing to come out of all this is that we get stories for days and days and days. All right, we've thrown a lot of these names out of potentials who could fit into the system that they have there with LeBron and whether it works money-wise and everything. What about Kawhi Leonard, Nick? Should he be the Lakers' top priority?
I think he was the Lakers' top priority the moment they signed LeBron and that Paul George had re-signed with OKC. The discussion was not, oh, the Lakers will obviously trade for Anthony Davis. That popped up mid-season when Anthony Davis made his trade demand. We know Kawhi wants to be in Los Angeles. I believe, from a basketball standpoint, he fits seamlessly with LeBron. He doesn't need the ball in his hands as much. He's not the one part of Kawhi's game that's not elite is his passing ability. LeBron will be able to pass forever. Sure. He obviously can guard the other team's best wing when LeBron's not doing that at this point in his career. So, yes, we know Kawhi, if he leaves Toronto, is going to Los Angeles. We just don't know which team in Los Angeles. Now, is Rob Pelinka the best guy to recruit him? Are the Lakers in the best position to get him if they keep the status quo in the front office coaching staff? Those are different discussions. But I know some people would say, why not go after Kevin Durant? My partner Chris Carter made that point. I just think it's not realistic. I think Kevin Durant is not a 1 in 10 shot. I think he's a 1 in 100 shot, if not more. And so I wouldn't expend my energy there. I would have Kawhi and Kyrie as my two realistic A-list guys.
I also think so. I've called Toronto games kind of spread out throughout the course of the season, most recently about a week ago. And I'll say this, and I think Kawhi Leonard is a quiet individual. Not a lot of people are real close with him, and you never really know what a guy is thinking, especially with the postseason ahead, which will probably factor into his decisions. People in Toronto believe that he's staying. There are those around the organization that have high expectations that he will re-sign there. So I think it's important to look at what matters most to Kawhi, and I'm not sure that's something we know. Does he prioritize being in Los Angeles? Does he prioritize being in what Toronto is, a incredibly well-run organization with a lot of potential, and does he have a comfort level there? And then, of course, there's the Clippers, and that's been the L.A. team that we have talked about, over the last year, and have attached Kawhi Leonard because he may not be a superstar that cares as much about the cachet and the bright lights that the Laker organization brings.
Chris, is it not true the blueprint was set with the possibility of Kawhi staying when Paul George decided to stay in Oklahoma City?
Yes.
Once that happened, and I think Toronto thought, you know what, if it happened, well, let's bring him in for a year. We could convince him. No one in a million years thought thought Paul George was going to stay there. They thought for sure he was in L.A. Do you think he has a good shot of coming to the Lakers, or do you see him staying in Toronto?
Well, I don't know whether or not he's going to stay in Toronto. I think if he does leave Toronto, he is going to L.A. It's just a matter of which L.A. franchise. Now, as far as Kawhi is concerned, I think how the playoffs unfold will go a long ways to determining whether or not he's going to stay there. How close they get to competing for a championship will determine whether or not he's going to make the decision to leave. But in looking at the situation, if you're Kawhi Leonard, why would you want to go to the Los Angeles Lakers, who have shown this dysfunction over the course of the 2018-2019 season? It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense for me. With all of the issues that have gone on behind the scenes in the front office, the friction between Rob Pelinka and Magic Johnson stepping down, in an impromptu fashion before the season finale, nobody expected that to happen. And so if you're Kawhi Leonard looking at that situation, and then you couple that with the fact that LeBron James missed 27 games this season, and this is the first time that he's missed significant time with an injury, and he's in his mid-30s, there have to be serious questions about whether or not you can be competitive with the Los Angeles Lakers.
Well, so that last part, I totally disagree with whether or not you can be competitive with the Lakers. Why would you pick the Lakers over the Clippers? Because Kawhi plus LeBron on the Lakers makes them a top-of-the-page championship favorite. Adding Kawhi to this current Clippers roster makes them a championship contender.
Yes.
And so there's a difference between being the contender and one of the favorites. Now, and again, we are assuming this isn't a post-Kevin Durant Golden State world where we get back to our regular NBA homeostasis where two top-level players and a good team around you is enough. But this is one of those, Kawhi staying with Toronto would have other effects negatively on the Lakers that cannot be dismissed. Because you mentioned Paul George. Paul George was a rental, and then he wasn't. Kawhi Leonard was a rental. If he ends up not being a rental, then how many front offices this summer say, you know what, why don't we get in this Anthony Davis sweepstakes? Well, who cares that he says he's leaving? One of the reasons the Lakers have a realistic shot at Anthony Davis is not because they can create the best package of any team in the league. They can create the best package of any team that Anthony Davis has said he wants to go to.
Yes.
But if you're Chicago and you see Oklahoma City convinced Paul George to stay, Toronto convinced Kawhi to stay, Anthony Davis from here, we've got a nice young core, why don't we overpay for Anthony Davis? Because it won't just be a rental. And then the Lakers are grasping. Because here are tiers of free agents. And people could argue that Klay Thompson should be in the first tier, but aside from that, it's pretty clear-cut. There's Kevin Durant, who is not going to the Lakers in my estimation. Kawhi Leonard, who we're discussing, and then Kyrie Irving is the X factor, who I believe is leaving Boston, but is leaning towards right here rather than out on the West Coast in L.A. Klay Thompson, I'd be shocked if he leaves. Shocked. And now I think Kimba would be a good fit. I'm not as high on Jimmy Butler, and I think DeMarcus Cousins would be an awful basketball fit along with LeBron defensively. But you're running out of names now. You're running out of actual top-level basketball players that can fill that max salary slot that the Lakers have so desperately kept
open. And I think
open.
that's the most important point, and it's very visible when we see that list and see those players up there. We don't know how many guys may stay with their own organizations, and when you start to check players off the list, there's not necessarily a lot of those top-tier guys that will potentially be available.
And the other question is, how many of those guys want to come and play alongside LeBron James? Because LeBron James plays a very specific brand of basketball, and that's the one thing that we don't have an answer to, but we're going to find out this offseason.
Well, I think that's for Jeannie Buss and for the Lakers organization. Yeah, you need to do your due diligence in making sure you're selecting the best candidate to run this operation, but you can't just dilly-dally with your time because these free agents are going to want to see exactly who's in place, who's going to be running the organization, what does the coaching staff look like. There's a lot of factors that those players care about, and they're going to care about the presentation of this entire group.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from First Things First, or go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.